Hi, I'm Owen from Rask Australia. Thanks for tuning in to the Rask Network.
Before we get into today's show, there are a few things we have to go over.
Firstly, what you're about to hear and see is limited to general information only. It's not personal financial advice like you get from a financial planner. Also, it's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future performance. That means that anything that's happened in the past, or we say today, is not necessarily going to reflect what happens in the future. Lastly, please consider that any of the guests or myself are featuring on this program may have a financial interest in some of the products or shares mentioned. That's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed today's program.
One of the questions we got was, would you recommend while renting to continue to save to reach that 20% deposit, which is pretty common in Australia to avoid lenders' mortgage insurance? Or would it be better to buy with a 10 to 15% deposit to save on rent and just have to pay for the LMI, the lender's mortgage insurance?
So this is, so lenders and mortgage insurance is something that covers the bank in case you default on your mortgage repayments. And so as most people will know, you need, if let's say it's $1 million house, let's say you're a high roller like Kate over here, right? So you want to go and buy $1 million house. I'm just joking, Kate. I don't think you're in the market for $1 million home, but let's say you have $1 million house and you want to buy that and you don't want to pay LMI, you would have to save $200,000 plus your stamp duty costs. So like your cost to actually get into the house. And so most people wouldn't have that for their first home. So then they have to cop something called LMI. And LMI is an insurance the bank tells you to get so that if you can't meet the repayments, the insurance should pay out and they are protected. You would still be liable if it was a shortfall, but that's basically how it works.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because it's an insurance that doesn't actually help you. It's insurance you're paying purely to protect the bank.
And that's why I always said, and I had this big beef with it, and people kind of called me out on this. I always said that it's the most expensive thing you should never have to pay, right?
Like I think I recall you saying that earlier last year.
Yeah.
You're pretty firm on that one.
Yeah, and I still haven't paid LMI because we did something which I also kind of not stressed against, but just kind of reminded people to consider, which is use a guarantor. So, there are many different moving parts to this, but I guess the crux of this question is, should I keep renting or just buy a house, pay the LMI? LMI can be pretty expensive. For those of you who don't know, let's say it's $500,000 or $600,000. I don't have the exact figures at the top of my head, but it might be 15 grand. So it's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money to pay. And if it goes on top of your loan, so it's something that you pay off, but if you can avoid it, don't pay it. But at the same time, right, you might be thinking, well, hey, Owen, if I'm only paying 3% or 4% on my interest rate for my mortgage, couldn't I just invest that money? Like if I had the $200,000 in this example, couldn't I invest that money for a better return? Maybe that's a consideration people make as well, or they think, I'm going to buy a $500,000 house. I've got 50 grand or 100 grand put aside. Wouldn't that be better to take 100% loan, cop the LMI, and then put the 100 grand into the property to try and increase the value of it over time? And those are all fair and reasonable questions. And another counterpoint is, well, the longer I'm out of the market, the longer it has to get away from me. So if I just take the LMI because I don't have the deposit, at least I'm in the market, and then I can benefit if share price, if the property prices go up. So, and those are all fair and reasonable points. And my only, I guess, counterpoint would be, my only guess stands one way or the other is just make sure that serviceability of the loan is completely out of the question. So you are more than comfortable borrowing at that amount if it's 100%. I mean, I really don't like the idea of LMI. If you can use a guarantor, you might be able to get around it. In Victoria, and I know in some other states, they have a program which only a few banks participate in, might be relevant to you, Kate. If it's below $600,000 in certain suburbs that you're buying, the government will actually step in and help you come up with a deposit, or at least mean that you don't have to get LMI. So they effectively provide the insurance for first home buyers. So that's something that we can put in the show notes, and it's something I actively considered. It turns out that I paid more than 600, but that's a way around it too. That might save you 15 grand just by going and buying under $600,000 in your suburb and following all those rules. But a good mortgage broker can help you out with that. Before you go and do that, make sure you look at the show notes. We'll put a link in just to see if you're eligible for this first home scheme. Kate, are you actually looking to buy a property, or is that kind of, you said to me a few weeks ago?
I think because we were talking about property a lot for a few months when you were looking, I got sort of all caught up in the momentum. But now it's sort of settled down and I'm like, oh, maybe that's not something I want to do right now. I think it's so easy with property to get caught up in the excitement, especially if people around you are looking to buy a property or buying their first home. It just, it's that Australian dream. You just can get really caught up in the moment. And now it's been a few months later and I'm just going, I'm not as excited about the idea right now for myself.
Yeah, fair enough. And you're doing a bit of study and all that on the side. So, it's fair enough. And it's a big commitment. So yeah, it's one of those things where I never had an issue with renting. Some people do think there's like stigma attached to it. I don't really care about that because I knew I was doing something else with my money. So I would say to people, don't be in a rush. Take your time. Make sure it's right for you. Property will always be there. You can invest in other ways.